Hi, I'm Wendy Murdoch, and this is Webinars with Wendy. I've been doing a series of webinars during the pandemic so that I can educate myself, keep myself like entertained, because I have some really amazing guests, and just share with you some of the amazing people that I know and I've come across in my life in this journey that we call horses. Today, my guest is Mary Debono, and Mary and I have probably known of each other for, I don't know, at least 10 years. If not.
Oh, more than that, Wendy.
Yeah. We're both Feldenkrais practitioners, and we've done a webinar earlier on Feldenkrais, and I'm sure Mary will go into that a bit. But we've been like ships in the night, constantly crossing paths and knowing the same people, but never getting to meet each other. So I am so excited today to have Mary as my guest, because I finally get to talk to her in person. So welcome, Mary. Thank you for joining me on this webinar.
Wendy, thank you so much. First of all, I'm super excited to finally meet you. And I'm just so, honored to be here and just thankful for these webinars you're doing. So thank you. And for this opportunity. I'm excited.
Oh, no worries. They're really fun because, like I said, now with the pandemic, even though people are figuring out how to go back to work, there's still a lot of people that aren't. And,
right.
But I always look for the good that comes out of something. And with the pandemic,
Yes.
the one thing that's really positive is that it's forced us to have a constraint and change the way we do things.
So we're going to talk about constraints too today.
Awesome.
So
because that's a really classic Feldenkrais idea.
Exactly.
But it's gotten people using technology that wouldn't otherwise.
Yes.
And you're very good. I can see you've got your mic and you're all set up, and you've been terrific to have as a guest. But there's a lot of people that I've had on that I had to, they had to get like their granddaughter or somebody to come and figure out their computer, and B, just walk them through the process and have a test Zoom to be able to bring that information. So what I know is that there's so much information out there that is kind of stuck in analog, if you will.
Yes.
And it's so valuable that that's really one of my goals here, is to bring that information out to the internet world so that people can access it whenever they want.
That's so awesome. And think about that. Think of how you're changing those guests' lives, because now they know how to do it. Now maybe they'll be brave enough to do their own Facebook Live, and again, get that information out to a broader audience. It's so wonderful, Wendy.
And actually that is what's happened, because I've had a number of guests and they're like, oh, I know how to do it now. And it's great. So yeah. I'm still training and teaching, right? Even if it's Zoom.
Yeah.
So Mary, tell us, I really don't know your background. I have no idea how you got here. So just tell us how you got to where you are today.
So I was one of those typical girls that was just born loving horses, just like out of the womb. I was born in the Bronx. Okay. So it wasn't like country, right? It wasn't like Texas or Virginia or someplace. We're talking the Bronx. But I just had this thing about all animals, but you know how it's like super specific, like you want a horse, and also dog. I was very drawn to dogs and horses particularly. And, I, as a young kid, read everything there was to read about dogs and horses. And I'm not talking about like stories. It's not like there's Black Beauty and all that. I was always in the adult books section, taking down horse books, breeds of horses, conformation, movement. And we did move away from the Bronx. We got a house on Long Island. We got a dog. So I was 7 maybe at that time. And we actually started showing our dog. So then I got really into movement. My dad and I did all this together. I really got into training and movement. I remember reading the book, The Dog in Action, which is all about biomechanics. Oh. And then what I did was I pretended my dog was a horse. So I would lunge my dog. We would do jumper courses. We did everything. He was a great dog, a Norwegian Elkhound named Zeus. Great name. Oh. And so it was always this horse. So I remember, Wendy, as a little kid, I would go to the library. I would take down all the dog books, all the horse books, and all the physical therapy books for people, because they had no physical therapy for horses back then, or dogs. And I would sit there thinking, I'm going to put this together somehow.
How old were you?
Oh, little, like 10, 11. I mean,
wow.
Isn't it amazing what is already in there? You know what I mean? Like the desire, right? And then luckily I have the dad that I have, and he became a horseman, I think because his daughters, you know, we all loved the horses. And so we, in addition to the dog, we eventually did get our own horse. But actually before that, we took lessons starting when I was quite young at Ann Gribbons's, you know, Ann
Oh,
Gribbons, I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah, well, we didn't train with her, but with her instructors on Long Island. So we were at her farm. As a matter of fact, my dad's horse that we had for 22 years, the most wonderful horse, was from her sire Bagatelle. So,
You know, I'm from Stamford, Connecticut, right? Just across the Sound.
oh yes, and now yes, I did know that. Yes, yeah, we were like close at one time.
Yeah.
Graphically, it's crazy. But so what's great too about growing up with my dad is my dad's an engineer, okay, and he's always learning. So he and I would study every book about dogs and horses that there were. And this is something I was thinking about this. This was a really fun game my dad and I had. We would go to horse shows. So this is before we had our own horse. I got my own horse when I was 17. We would go to horse shows. We would watch jumper classes. And we had a game that 3 strides before the fence, as observers, we would whisper to each other how the horse was going to do over that fence. Was he going to touch a hind rail with a hind foot? Was he going to refuse? Would the horse run out? And we got really good because, you know, the movement, everything happens before the fence, right?
Right.
You know, people think it happens at the fence.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't. So that was our thing, was we had to call it no later than 3 strides before the fence. You know, we'd park at a certain fence.
Right.
And that from a really young age, Wendy, taught me to really observe, to really tune in. And my dad, as much as an engineer he is, he also has an intuitive side. So we were tapping into like both of that. I think he doesn't like talk about the intuition, but it's there big time.
I'd be curious what his Myers-Briggs is.
Oh, I don't know what mine is even. People have guessed. I've never done that, and he hasn't done that, I don't believe either. But yeah, now he's closing in on 96 now.
Oh, wow.
Still living by himself on horse property and doing all wonderful things out there, chainsawing trees and
On Long Island?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's really awesome. But so growing up with him allowed, I think, helped train my eye and my heart, if you will, like to start to, I don't want to say communicate in the fact that get in that information of what the horse was going to do. So I was always drawn to this. So I actually started doing hands-on work with horses before I even knew about Feldenkrais.
Oh, wow.
And I was very drawn to working, and we're going to, you know, what I'd love to share with people today is a lot of stuff with the ribs and the sternum. For some reason, that's always been a big draw for me. And I remember in my Feldenkrais training, which I took in the early 90s, I thought, oh, they do this with people. This is what I've been doing with horses for, you know, all these years, right? So that's my background, is that's why Feldenkrais was such a natural for me, because it was like, oh, it's all about, you know, observing movement, sensing movement. It's all stuff that my dad and I have been doing since I was a little kid.
Oh, that is so amazing, and so amazing to have a dad that's so supportive and,
yes,
you know,
yes,
really cool. Because you know, I find, and I'm sure you do too, that the hardest thing for people is to learn to observe.
yes.
Once we can see it, we can do something about it. But if, you know, I always say, you know, how often have you walked around with your keys in your hand and you couldn't start your car?
Right. Or your phone, you're on your phone. Have you ever done that one?
Oh, I've had WhatsApp meetings, video, and then I keep looking for my phone and I'm staring at it, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No. But that's the thing, is until we observe it, it doesn't exist. And so it's so many people, you know, can't see what's happening with their horse because they haven't been trained. And it is a skill. It's absolutely a skill. It requires training and honing, and anybody can do it. But it's something that we have to develop. And when we're not taught how to do that, we can't see what's in front of us. And so that's, yes, absolutely. Feldenkrais is one of the, you know, I've trained with Mia Siegel in addition to my full training. And the rib cage is huge with Mia, and, you know, learning to observe.
Yes, love Mia. Yes. She's a treasure. She is a treasure. Yeah. Yeah. How wonderful. But yeah, so But what I found too, though, Wendy, because I've been teaching this, so I've been teaching, workshops where I teach people how to do gentle, basic hands-on moves with the horses. And I actually find sometimes that the less experienced horse people are more open to seeing things because they're not already habituated.
Right.
So they don't have a thing that I'm supposed to, so I always tell people, what's your first impression when you see the horse walk? Just go with that, and then we can fine tune it. So yeah, for sure. So yeah.
All right. So you spent this time with your dad and you sat there and watched horses at horse shows. And then did you go to college, or where'd you go?
Actually, you know what? So my backstory is I didn't go to college, and I was in all honors classes in high school. I took a business track and an academic track because I loved science and math. I skipped a year of math. I mean, it was like, I loved that part, and my dad's an engineer. It was like very, but the thought of leaving my horse, and this is before people would take horses to college and all that. So I got a job right out of high school. And actually I worked in Manhattan for a number of years because I grew up on Long Island. As a matter of fact, I worked for a while at the Twin Towers. And then what I did is I'm always a worker, so I made my money, I saved up money. I then got training in programming computers. And I got a job. And so for 10 years, and then I went from being a programmer to a systems analyst and a systems designer. So then for 10 years, I designed computer systems for Wall Street firms and insurance and aerospace industry. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's my background. I was good at, I have to say, it wasn't a passion, but I was good at it.
Right. Well, it's those skills that you already had that you just applied.
Yes,
the observation, the detail-oriented, the engineering thoughts, the math. That's all. I tried to work with computers, but I couldn't see the one little error I made, and then it didn't work.
Oh yeah. Wendy, to this day, I love flow charts. I'm old school because we're talking like in the 80s, like early 80s when I started my career, and it's like, I still love a good flow chart.
Yeah.
It's just, I love that way of thinking, but I also love the more expanded, more intuitive. So I think like my dad, I think I have both.
Yeah, I think so. So, okay. So did you still have your horse while you were working?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That was so I've had horses continuously since I was a teenager. And so I moved out. Okay. So that was Long Island. And then I got a big job in Princeton, New Jersey with a data center for a Wall Street firm. And we opened up a big data center there. So they moved me there. And that was beautiful because horse country, oh my gosh. And people, joke around about New Jersey, but New Jersey is beautiful. It's there's really nice horse.
It's called the Garden State for a reason.
Yes, yes.
And
I loved it.
To go out and teach in White Post. I think it was White Post, which isn't far, 202.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes. There's a lot of big name people out there
absolutely.
Too.
Big country. Yep.
Big, yes. So, but then, so actually, I'll tell you how I discovered Feldenkrais. So then, again, I was good at the computer stuff, and it paid well. Honestly, it paid well, but it wasn't my passion. And I was on call 24/7. It was very stressful as well. And it wasn't my passion. And I was really getting to a place in my life where I didn't want the horses just after work and on the weekends. I wanted my whole life to be what I believed in. And I had such a mission. I kept being drawn. Like I said, I was already working hands-on, not full-time, not professionally, but doing this with my horses, my friends' horses, dogs, etc. So so while I was still working, I discovered, you're a big fan of Linda Tellington Jones.
Oh yeah, I started with her.
Yeah. So I discovered her work, and I'm like, oh, there's something very holistic about this, meaning she's taking in the whole body, spirit, the whole package of the horse, not just treating something. I love that approach. So I remember reading something she had, and it mentioned this thing called the Feldenkrais method, because as you know, she's a Feldenkrais practitioner. She trained with Moshe. So I thought, I wonder what that's about. And I'm still thinking about horses though. And I sent away, this is when we did things by mail. There was a toll-free number. No, I made a phone call. That we did have telephones back then. And they sent me something in the mail. I remember it was on pink paper. the guild sent me a thing, and there, lo and behold, there was a practitioner in Princeton, Lawrence Phillips, who's now in the outside of Denver. And I called him just out of curiosity. And let me give you a little backstory about me, Wendy. I was fine. I thought I was healthy and all that, but I had really severe bilateral carpal tunnel syndrome that I had surgery on one arm, which was my less affected arm, made it 1,000,000 times worse. I had had a really bad hip problem since I was a teenager, like excruciating pain. I was told I was going to need a hip replacement by the time I was 35. I had neck issues. I had back pain. But I thought, well, I'm getting older. I was in my 20s. And
okay.
But I mean, I was in pain. I would be like this all day, like with my arms, and I would have numb arms from here down when I woke up. I mean, I was a mess. And I tried all kinds of physical therapy 3 times a week for months and months, chiropractor, acupuncture, you name it. I tried it. I hadn't heard of Feldenkrais though. So, but again, I'm still thinking about the horses. I'm not thinking I'm fine, right?
That's so classic horse person.
Isn't it? It's so I get it when people do this.
It's like the Monty Python skit, right? It's like...
I totally get it. So I called up Lawrence Phillips, and I don't know what he said to me on the phone because I wish I knew, but I paid that $125 and came to his office. And back then that was, a
lot of money in the 80s.
Yeah. And I remember lying on his table. I didn't know what he was doing, really. It was very gentle. I'm like, I really wasn't sure what it was about, but I recognized it was similar to what I was doing with the horses. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to learn this and I'm going to take it to the animal world.
Oh, wow.
Like it was so precise, like his work was gentle, but very precise. And, my hip pain didn't go away in one session, but I started actually going to him 3 times a week in the beginning. Yeah. And then I kind of weaned off, but that's the best way to do it, as you know.
Right.
And, if you can. And it was the best investment I ever made because I knew immediately this was work that I was born to do. So I credit him so much. He's in my dog book that I wrote. He's in another book that I'm a chapter in someone else's book. I talk about him all the time because whatever he did, it was magic, but it wasn't magic. It was, it's based in Feldenkrais.
Yeah,
it's Feldenkrais.
And just so that people know, when you have a Feldenkrais lesson, it's like a private lesson. It's called functional integration, and you're on a table. You're fully dressed, and it's a lesson because you're learning about your body and how it moves. So it's not massage. It's not a therapy. It really is an education, and our body is the sort of the laboratory that we're going through. Yeah.
I love how, Moshe always said, movement is the first language of the brain.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's like, it's such a great thing to remember because we learn, we experience our world through our movement. So if you can change that, because what ended up happening, Wendy, is I then became more passionate about being creative and wanting to follow my passion. So before long, that job, my corporate career was history. And I had my horse on a trailer and we moved 3,000 miles because I wanted to train with Mark Reese, who was fortunately passed away. Yeah.
He was one of my trainers.
Yeah. Oh, was he one of yours too?
Yeah. And I was in Baltimore too. And he came in.
Oh, okay. Because he was wonderful.
Yeah, good friends with Mark and Carol Kress.
Yes. Well, Carol Kress was his wife.
David, yes.
Yes, David and Mark. Yes. Yeah. So Mark Reese was a wonderful trainer, like amazing trainer. And I knew I wanted to train with him. So I quit my corporate career. My Appaloosa and I went 3,000 miles it was a real sacrifice, but we moved to San Diego.
Oh,
it's a real sacrifice. But
it's so fascinating because you're not the first person that had an experience with Feldenkrais or something. There's other modalities, but an experience with a modality, and then instantly, like when I met Linda Tillington Jones, I was a grad student getting my working on my PhD. I never got it, but I came home and left school. It was like,
wow.
Done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow,
that's so it is life-changing.
Cool.
And it's amazing work. So, okay, so you went to California. What year was that?
92.
92. Okay.
So I
you
had already
started-
started doing the work professionally before then when I lived in New Jersey.
Right.
And then I was able to get, I got accepted into the program and moved out at the end of 92. Yeah.
You've been in California now for
28 years.
Yeah, I was going to say almost 30 years. Wow.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Strange to think of the 90s as 30 years ago.
Okay? I know. Isn't that hard? I know. I still think of the 90s as just yesterday.
I know. Yeah. For many of us, it was
weird.
just yesterday.
It's kind of weird. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And so you've studied the Feldenkrais method, and I know that since then you've been really bringing the work to horse people and dog people. And just tell us a little bit about that, and then we can go into the slide presentation.
So what was really great about being so immersed in the training, in the Feldenkrais training, was I was already working professionally with the horses and with the dogs, right? So every time we would learn something in class, right, in our Feldenkrais class, I would have my little notebook, and I would immediately, as just say Mark is teaching something, there's a person on the table and he's demonstrating, to do this with their arm or whatever. I would think, okay, now a horse is standing on all fours, they're not going to lie on a table. Okay, how would I translate that? How would I get that same result, that same idea, with a horse who has a different relationship to gravity, standing up? So I immediately was taking everything I learned and translating it to horses. And then I would translate it to dogs, who you generally can have them laying down. And then I would think, okay, from a rider point of view, how would that help a rider? So I had like these different things I was doing. I wasn't just absorbing it from the point of view of a person lying on a table. Mm-hmm. That person became a horse, became a dog, became an equestrian on a horse. So that's how I did it. And then because I was working as well as going to class, I had a great opportunity to practice everything. Right. So all my clients got the benefit of everything I would learn. So my own animals, of course, too. But it was really a great opportunity. And that's why, because I'll be honest, Wendy, a lot of Feldies will tell me, I love horses, I love dogs, whatever, but I have no idea how to translate the work. Mm-hmm. I think because I came into it from the other direction, maybe it was more natural even to do it with them.
And it's so interesting because when I was doing my training, I was still teaching and riding. And so I was working on my horses. I brought them to Baltimore and put them in a stable so that I could go to class and come home every night and ride my horses and work with them. So they were literally right there during the trainings. But the thing that's I think we're so lucky as Feldenkrais practitioners working with horses is the horses are so honest about the quality of our touch. Whereas a person on the table will go, I'm fine. I'm fine. The horses will not go, I'm fine. They will say, no, I don't like that, or yes, I like that. And so I think that any of us that are working with horses have if you will, an even finer quality of touch because the animals give us this immediate feedback and either accept or reject, right?
You know what, Wendy, that's such a good point because that is so true where a human is like being polite and not, and the humans also have a lot of stuff going on, like I'm supposed to like this, or what is she doing, or whatever, where the horses or the dog, they don't have that. So you're absolutely right. But the other thing that's helpful, and I'm sure you felt the same way, is because when you're working with a horse, you're really aware of how you're using your body.
Oh, yeah.
I remember in class, Mark was, and he was criticized, in a good way. He was teaching, so he was critical of a lot of people of how they use themselves when they were giving functional integration to another person. And I remember him saying, and I don't say this to brag, but just to point out the horse connection, he said, you have an extraordinarily good use of yourself when you're working. And one of my classmates said, that's because she works with horses.
Yeah.
Which was probably true because I was aware of that from day one.
Right.
Whereas other people had to be, reminded of it.
Well, again, we have that immediate feedback of the horse, whether we're riding or working with them on the ground. And, I've had a similar kind of comment from Mia, because I trained with her quite a bit, in that we need to know how to use our body to have the horse, be able to understand what we're asking because our body is the communication.
Yes,
And
yes,
so, you know, our use of self, and that's the thing, what people have to realize when you're going through a Feldenkrais training is it's 4 years of learning how to use your own body. And that's really the key, is the better I can organize myself when I'm working with a
yes,
client, the better the lesson's going to be for the client. And I'm sure you experienced in your training how, as the students improved, the quality of touch and the quality of the lessons that we were giving, we would give each other lessons as
yes,
practice.
yes,
It changed and changed and changed. And when someone discovered how to use their pelvis, it was like just
yes.
magic. It just really shifted.
Absolutely, Wendy. And what I found is that it didn't become like move this arm. It was like an invitation. And that's what I tell people when I'm teaching them how to do it with horses. When you use your pelvis, when you can engage your pelvis, it's an invitation to move. It's not a demand. It's not like, let's, you know, move this way. It's, would you like to move with me this way? It's so different. It's
Yes, and
so
it's so
different.
obvious to the
Absolutely.
horses what the request
Yes. Yes.
is.
That's beautiful what you said, that our bodies are the, now I can't remember exactly how you said it, but
Okay, it's recorded.
oh yeah, there you go. We can just go back. But that was really beautiful. And that's something for people to remember, because all the time, not even just if we're doing hands-on work, but when we're riding and when we're leading our horse, you know, all of that.
Right.
And as horse people, in a lot of ways, we do have that. It's like a little bonus that we already are a little bit aware of that more than the regular folks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, I always think of myself as super lucky to be a Feldenkrais practitioner that works with riders and horses,
Yes.
because it's applied instantly.
Yes.
The
Yes.
the whole point of Feldenkrais is that we can learn how to use this body that we have to our potential in learning new possibilities of movement. And the horses are so, I would go to a training and I'd go for 9 days and I'd come home and sit on my horse and he'd say, "That's great. Now go back for 9 more days."
Yeah. That's a start.
Keep going.
Yeah. 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 Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Isn't it great? I remember one particular, oh my gosh, I remember this so clearly. I had done an ATM at home. I was in the training, but I was doing an ATM at home, awareness through movement lesson for those. It wasn't anything to do with a bank machine. Awareness through movement lesson, the Feldenkrais lesson. And I felt such a change, and I went and rode my horse, and suddenly my horse, who had been having a little stickiness with shoulder in, this and that, suddenly became able to do things that we couldn't do the day before. Now, of course, all the while it was me. It wasn't my horse that had the restriction, but it was just such an instantaneous improvement that, oh, I love it. Love it. So yes, we're very lucky. Very, very lucky.
Yep. All right. So now you've been in California for almost 30 years and you've been developing your techniques and
Yes.
developing your work.
Yes.
So that's what you're going to present to us today?
Yes, yes, yes. So I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah.
All righty. So let's see. We got, oops. Let's start from the beginning. Okay. So let's just go back. Okay. So this is, as you know, about using Feldenkrais to improve performance and partnership. And so in this webinar, I'd really love to show you how we can truly improve equine movement and athletic ability. So by the end of this time together, I'd love to be able to show everyone a few little things they can do to improve their horse's body awareness and at the same time, deepen your connection with your horse. So these are some of the most common things that people complain about to me about their horses, right? They tell me their horse is crooked, right? They don't bend easily to one side or maybe both. They're stiff, they're sore, they're girthy. We're going to talk about that. That's a big one. They may be considered lazy, or maybe the opposite, they're nervous, or they're just resistant. These are labels people use, right? So we want the horse to be balanced and straight, supple, strong, sound, happy to be saddled. I know that's a surprise for many of you, right? Responsive to your leg, confident and brave, and willing and enthusiastic, right? Those are desired qualities. So you might be wondering, how do you get there, right? From the before to the after. Well, this is really what I want to get through in this time together, is that you can definitely help your horse feel greater ease and ability in their body and mind, okay? And again, at the same time, deepen your partnership. that is such a big key for me, this whole idea of connecting, because I think that's why we are around horses, right? Is to get that beautiful feeling of connection, right? So this doesn't take any kind of magical power, right? You can definitely do this. Okay, so because we have to remember that intentionally or not, we're always influencing our horse's movement and behavior, okay? So the more you develop your awareness, the more you can positively influence your horse's flexibility, their coordination, and their balance. And again, the more joy and connection you'll feel when you're with your horse. So you might be saying, how can you become more aware? What does that even mean, right? Well, step number 1, start paying attention to those small, subtle details about your horse's posture, their movement patterns, and their behavior. So we always remember, and I'm sure Wendy will agree with this for sure, is curiosity is one of your greatest tools, right? Being curious, like instead of like, oh, my horse doesn't do this that well. Why doesn't your horse do it? Like, be curious, not critical. I call it compassionate curiosity, where you're not judging, you're just being compassionately curious.
You know,
And we
Mary,
have to,
you bring up such a good point about curiosity, and I'm sure that you'll agree that unfortunately, the way we're taught about riding and horses from that military background is we're taught it's got to be right or wrong. And we lose this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it becomes, and I totally would agree with you that the curiosity is so important. And yet it's and this is changing, which is really good, but the system that we're trained in, you know, okay, so I'll often ask my students, what do you do right? And
that's what yes, I
right?
agree
And
with
they go,
that.
you know, and they'll hem and haw for 5 minutes. What do you do wrong? I can't sit the trot. I don't get the Canada parts. Blah, 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 right? And we're already setting ourselves up for failure because we're not looking at the things we're doing. And this is such a great point about being curious about all the things. And it's also what we want the horses to be.
Exactly. And Wendy, I'm so glad you said that about what do you do right? Because I even asked them that about their horses, because again, they'll say, my horse is crooked, my horse is resistant, my horse is blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what's something your horse really loves to do? Now, some people will say, yeah, he loves to eat, but
that's okay.
You know, that's okay. Right. But then what else does he like to do? Well, actually he's really good at the, extended trot or, whatever they'll tell me. And I'm like, okay, we can start by doing what's easy for the horse. And we're going to talk about that more too.
Right.
But I think that's so important, is that it's not that there's something right or wrong, and we have to kind of get away from that. And I hopefully, like with all these wonderful webinars you're doing and all the work you do, people will start getting away from that and being just more compassionately curious and not judging it.
Right. And it doesn't mean we don't notice the things we have difficulty with. I think sometimes people think, well, we're just talking Pollyanna.
Yeah,
no. It's not Pollyanna. It's just making sure that we give the things that are going well equal time, at least equal time.
And building on that. So we're going to talk actually about how you build on that. So you find the thing your horse does easily and you build on that, rather than taking what the horse does that's difficult and trying to break it apart and make it better. Why don't we start with what's easy?
Yep.
Okay. And go and get to the difficult thing. Okay. And we have to remember these small things we're talking about, like changes of like noticing how your horse loads each limb, that may seem small at the moment, but they become big things. Okay. They're never just small things. So just
that's actually where the surefoot pads can be really helpful.
Yes, I'm sure. Matter of fact, I'd love to talk about that later too, about using them to add variations into a session.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so step number 2 is to add pleasant, novel, non-habitual movements and sensations into your horse's life and your own. Okay, very Feldenkrais thing, because the non-habitual sensations and movements are what get the attention of the nervous system and help you start interrupting the horse's habitual way of doing things and your own, which is great because when you work with horses, you get the benefit of it, as you know, Wendy. So it's pretty cool. So step 3, and this is very important and something I think that a lot of people don't think about, but you want to associate the movement with ease and pleasure. It's not like just do it like the old Nike commercial, right? We want that feeling of ease and pleasure, Okay, so that means we're going to go what we were just talking about, finding what's easy for your horse and building on that. And you do that by asking questions. Now, I'm not saying ask questions verbally, but you can if you want. Maybe your horse will answer. But with the hands-on work, we ask questions with our hands. So we're constantly asking questions, right? When you're riding, your whole body, like what Wendy said before about we communicate with our body, we're constantly asking questions. Can you do this easily? Is this way easier than this way? Where can we find the direction of ease? Okay, very important. So it's not, we're not forcing anything. We're finding the ease and the pleasure and building on that. So again, suggest and support movement, don't insist on it. So when I'm working with a horse, doing Feldenkrais, every session is unique, right? Even if it's the same horse that I'm working with multiple times, every session is going to be different because they're presenting differently, right? And I'm constantly asking these questions. How can I provide support so that the movement feels simple, light, and easy? And how should I adjust my intention, my direction, and my pressure, right? Intention's a big one. So we always want to be asking questions, right? They talk about the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask, right? So when you're with your horse, it's like you're asking questions, you're being curious. Very important.
And don't you feel that those questions really keep you present?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, well, you read my mind because what this slide says is these questions help you slow down and tune into your horse so that you have a true two-way kinesthetic conversation. So it becomes a true partnership because you're not just telling the horse something, you're communicating. And this is, and oh my gosh, I love this the most. You get that delicious feeling of connection. I mean, to me, it's one of the best feelings in the world when your nervous systems are so synced up, you and the horse, and you're just like moving as one. And I'm talking about even on the ground, not even in the saddle. It's such a delicious feeling because I think that's something that the brain wants to recreate, that feeling of ease and of connection. Okay. So
and I'm probably going to prime you here again, but the lack of
yes.
expectation.
Yes, yes,
So,
I love that.
You know, when we're goal oriented or we think we should be fixing something, that so gets in the way of really being
Yes.
the horse.
Wendy, thank you for saying that because you get that a lot actually, and you probably have discovered this with maybe some students as well, is they assume there's an expectation, a goal or something has to be right or wrong, where it's not that way. And the other thing is, when I said like each session is unique, there is no playbook, there's no recipe. Right. Now, when I teach this, because I do teach this work to people, is I give them different moves to do with the horses. And then as they get more experience and they build up their ability to sense with their hands, right, then they can be a little more off the cuff. But they do get a good foundation first. But once you know it, there is no recipe. There's no recipe. You just go by what the horse needs at that moment. Okay. So yeah, so people often ask me like, how do you make a session? Like, I can't tell you how many times, Wendy, I've gotten this question lately. Like they say, how do you even create a session for a horse? So what I generally do is I take a function, and I'm going to use the two most common ones because I get these questions a lot, is my horse is resistant to bending on one side, or my horse doesn't want to round her back, right? Collect, engage the hind end, all that. So I take a function and I break it down into little pieces, okay? Then I help the horse improve each little piece so that it's easy, healthy, and pleasurable for the horse. And what do I mean by healthy? Healthy is that efficient movement where the distribution of effort, this is a big thing in the Feldenkrais world, the distribution of effort is appropriate so that no one place is getting all the stress and strain, because that's what leads to damage, right? That leads to injuries, unsoundness, etc. And it doesn't even feel good to the horse, okay? So it's really, really important. So we take each piece, we make it good, and then we, piece by piece, build it back up into a functional movement again, okay? It's really very basic. You know, you chunk it down and you kind of chunk it back up, right?
And, you know, Mary, if we can go back to the previous slide for a moment,
Sure.
I just want to make a point that there are so many horse people that think I want to do the best for my horse, and I'm going to give him the best tack and the best, right? But they don't take care of themselves.
Yes,
And
yes,
then
yes.
they're not really healthy to help their horse.
This is why, Wendy, it's like, to me, we have to work with the rider. It's like, it's very difficult to, it became finally that I don't just work with the horses, because
Right.
I
That's why I
can't.
got into the Feldenkrais work, actually, because
Okay. Because you were helping the horses, and then you couldn't,
you know, until I helped the people, I couldn't, I could change one horse, but if I changed one rider, I changed every horse they had.
That is so beautiful. Yes, yes, yes.
And so, sorry, but you know, there's so many barn owners and stuff, and they'll sacrifice themselves, they'll work themselves endless hours. It's not sustainable. And yet they're saying that they're there to help the horses, but if they're not following this same rule of easy, healthy, pleasurable, and obviously easy means finding more efficient ways to do things.
Right. It doesn't mean laying on the couch. You know what I mean? It's not, you're, you know, Moshe was a martial artist. I mean, he was,
Right. But
it's a feeling of ease. It's a feeling of ease.
Right. But that's the thing, is so many people think, well, I'll do all this stuff for my horse, but I'll sacrifice myself. But in the end, they're not helping their horse because they still are interacting with that horse.
And if I can give you a quick example of that, Wendy, there's a woman who I adore. Her name is Jay McLeod. She's up in LA. She's a dressage trainer. You would love her because, you know, no gadgets, no anything. She's in her 80s now. And she has, unfortunately, had many accidents, not all of them horse related, but I'm talking severe accidents. But she still gets up and rides. And she was an event rider. And now she specialized in dressage for many years now. And when I would clinic up there a lot, and I would work with particular horses that I could tell you, and I was 100% right all the time, whether the owner had been riding the horse that week or Jane was riding the horse. Because when Jane rode the horse felt so good. The back was moving, everything was, I mean, the horse was already really well organized. I mean, I was putting some, you know, fine tuning, but I always knew. And a lot of times when there were particular owners that were riding the horses, like, I could feel it in the horse. I could feel it because they weren't using themselves. So to your point, it can be that obvious that I could put my hands on a horse and say, all right, Jane, you know, the owner's been out of town for a week. I can feel it in the horse, right? So, so it's very important. So don't think you're saving, you know, doing your horse a favor if you neglect yourself.
Exactly. That's the point.
Yeah, that's the point.
Well,
and I hope everyone gets that. If anything, I would say it's probably more important that they take care of themselves, because the horse will always benefit. And like you said, then many horses actually will benefit. So for sure.
Yeah. We have a comment here from Sarah that says, I agree, riders need to work on themselves, but this seems like it should apply not only to the physical, but also mental, emotional, like you were mentioning, having a lack of expectation, being present rather than having an agenda that drives everything. Yes, absolutely.
Well, and I absolutely agree with that, which is another reason why I became an NLP practitioner as well as a Feldenkrais practitioner. So because, and Feldenkrais helps with the mind too, but NLP has some really specific techniques that help with your mental habits as well. And I find it really effective.
Someone else is commenting that this is an important point, but the same applies to nutrition. I totally agree.
Absolutely.
As nutritional therapists have thought about this too, that many people focus on their horse's diet, but not their own. And yes.
Okay. When you'll laugh at this, I see, oh my goodness. So, you know, I'm also in the dog world, and there's, I've been feeding my dogs raw for before it was cool to feed raw, because I happen to know a woman named Kimothy Schultz back in the day before she was famous. And she got me into the whole raw thing many, you know, decades ago. And it's so funny how so many people would go out and buy the organic best dog food, you know, the best of the best of the best for their dogs. And they would sit there and be eating McDonald's, literally going to McDonald's for dinner. And I would think, okay, what's wrong with this picture? Because to me, and now this is becoming a thing, is this term called One Health, where it's, I love it. I just read about that in the Whole Dog Journal, where they're talking more about this, where it's the whole ecosystem. In other words, your whole family, your dogs, your cats, your horses, and yourself have like an ecology, if you will, and it's all about one health. So yes, absolutely, the nutrition, the movement, all of those things, we all have to do it for ourselves as well as our animals, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. So then we talk about, we build it back up into a movement. And along the way, what we do is we use the supportive contact. We use very gentle, non-habitual movements to stimulate learning, because it's what Wendy said earlier. Feldenkrais method is not a therapy. It's actually like, it's an educational system, if you will. So we use novel sensations to get the attention of the nervous system, and we use variations to help the horse integrate the learning. This is where your surefoot really comes into play. Now, you know a practitioner named Leah Astrup. You know
She's
Leah.
great. Yep.
She is beyond great, and you're going to see her in a second.
Cool.
She is, we've been working together for about 10 years, and she does a lot with surefoot. And it's so wonderful to really bring that in, to give the horse other sensations, because that's what helps the horse integrate and keep the learning. You know, it just brings more to the table. So, okay, so here we talked earlier about constraints, right? So we use creative constraints that encourage the horse to discover new ways to move and feel. So this is just a little video clip of Leah and I working together, using constraints to help a horse move more freely through his back. Now I want to just set up the situation here. This was a horse that, when I started the session, this is just a little brief at the end of the session what we did. But the whole session, you know, in the beginning of the session, he was very restricted through his back and his rib cage. And his owner had her complaint, if you will, was that, you know, he doesn't round his back easily. He doesn't engage his hind end. You know, he was missing that piece. Very lovely, lovely horse, and a very lovely rider as well, very educated and all that. But you'll see what Leah and I do to set up the environment for the horse so he can figure out what to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So this is a great way to help a horse connect. That's Leah's hand on the horse's pelvis there. Starting off by just very gently, just giving a little movement through the sternum for him to feel the movement in his back. Leah, why don't we start from the beginning? So we're just going to see, he's going to move for a second, so we're just going to let him organize. Now watch this. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah, you can see it going all the way through.
Yeah. So pay attention. I hope everyone can see that, because my hand is really light on his sternum, because he's now, after having a whole session, he's so well organized that the tiniest amount of pressure, it goes right into him rounding his lower back. Okay, so and you'll see how it gets better as we go along. And this was a horse that couldn't move his back when we started. Now watch that. His whole rib cage changes.
Yep. And his whole balance just there. He shifts his entire balance.
Yes, yeah. So watch what Leah does now. She has her arm across the horse's pelvis. So she's...
And so she's basically creating a constraint with...
Yes.
Right?
She's stopping the movement from going all the way through. Yes.
Interesting little twist.
And you'll see how it develops even more if you look closely.
And the whole neck just let go.
Yes. So now she's not, now she lightened her touch. I asked her to. You see that? See that now? Yeah. And you'll see right behind the shoulder blades that the withers have changed. Leah's going to initiate it, and I'm going to actually...
Well, and there's increased relaxation as well.
Yes. Yes, we kind of noticed that. Yeah. But isn't that, yeah. So we're going to do just a couple more variations.
Well, and the thing for people to realize why this is so important is that if the horse moves his legs, then he's not going to be changing his body. Oh, wow, that was amazing. Yeah,
see that? Did you see that? See, and I get so excited about it.
Right, so the horse needs to know how to lift.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that.
Really
see
awesome.
what he's doing? Yeah. So now we're there. Look at that. Look at that. Look at the difference in that horse.
It's so much easier. Yeah, now we can do that.
Yeah.
Now
So,
we can do that. Okay. That is awesome.
And the amount of pressure that Leah is exerting is really small. I want people to realize she's not forcing the horse to stay still. It's a lot of if you don't mind me taking over here, it's a
no,
suggestion.
please do. Yeah, it's
So
a suggestion.
Right. So constraints put a limit on us, so that we can find another possibility of movement. So if the horse moved from your hand on the sternum and moved his feet, he wouldn't be changing the middle of his body. And so that hand on his pelvis allowed him to figure out how to move the midsection, and then he could do it on his own.
Right. And yes, because then when she took her hand away, he's doing it. But also, even if he would have stayed where he was without moving his feet, the constraint on the pelvis doesn't allow the mechanical energy, if you will, to go out the pelvis.
Right.
She just, by very gently having her arm there, she created that constraint. So now it had to go somewhere else.
Right.
So even if your horse is not, and by the way, this just to be clear, this wasn't meant as like, okay, go home and do this now with your own horses. I'm using so is Leah, very particular ways of connecting with the horse here.
What we can see is these are two trained professionals on a closed track. Do not try this at home.
Yes. Now, if you happen to live in Michigan, where Leah is from, look her up. She's awesome, but and she can help you learn how to do that. So, okay.
Because it would be really, really easy to apply too much pressure or to, again, be so focused on the goal that you miss the process. And as you said, this is at the end of the session with this horse, so that he's been prepared for this in context, as opposed to just going for the goal.
Absolutely. I had a bad experience a number of years ago where I had written an article for a magazine, and I was describing my ischium wave, where you put very gentle pressure through the ischium, through the horse, and I described the whole thing. And somebody who had she was a publisher, she put something online. She created her own video that was horrendous, where she was using all this force and basically pushing the horse. And it was really awful. And she had a completely she was misunderstanding the nature of the work. So, and I find that a lot, people use way too much pressure with horses. So when in doubt, I tell people, do a tenth of what you're doing.
Right.
Usually. And usually then you're on.
Because we tend to think of them as a large animal and therefore needing more exertion from us.
Right.
And really, and this is true in the riding too, that, it just, if you haven't sweated in your lesson, if you hadn't worked really, I lost a job once because my lesson was not sweaty enough for the, if you will, they didn't work hard enough.
They didn't understand. Yeah.
Right. And it was like, okay, fine. But the thing is, the whole purpose is to educate the horse so that he can figure out how to use his body. And in the rider's position is to ask and allow the horse to be our movement. Right.
Yes. That's so beautiful how you say that, Wendy. That is it. Yes. And we're so fortunate that they play with us this way. Right. Yeah. But it's so light. And I think that's one thing that I have discovered when people start learning how to do this with their own horses, with the hands-on work, and I can coach them, or Leah can coach them, she also teaches this, is that you can be really light, and they realize then, I don't need to be so forceful in the saddle either. Mm-hmm. So yeah, really, really important stuff. So, okay, so I'm just saying, see how different this is than forcing a horse, trying to use a gadget or something and getting a horse to try to do it and hope that they improve, right? Most of the time, they're going to end up with really damaging compensations along the way, mentally and physically. We have to think about the mental aspect too of what we do with the horses.
This goes so well with the webinar I did yesterday with Dr. Madeline Ward, who talked about, I
love Dr. Ward.
Yeah, we talked about 5-element theory and how different traits, right, require different levels of sensitivity when working with them, whether it's an earth horse or whatever. And I think the same thing here is that we have to be able to tune our body and our intention to the nature of that individual, because it's just like people, what could be really pleasant for one horse could be super upsetting for another.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really, really good point, Wendy, because one of the things as Feldenkrais people, we know that safety, the feeling of safety is so important. So when I say easy and pleasurable, that encompasses this feeling of safety, right? So for example, if you said to me, Mary, do a back bend, that wouldn't bother me. I could do it easily. Other people, the thought of having their head in that position would not be safe, okay?
Right.
So you could, say you go to a class and everybody's doing one, you might feel some pressure to do it, and you might get there, you might do it, but your body wouldn't feel safe doing it if you hadn't broken it down and really learned how each piece of that could feel easy and safe. And it's the same thing with the horses. You can kind of get the horse to do certain things, but if you haven't, you know, really gotten it in a way that it's healthy and safe, the nervous system will reject it. And they'll develop compensations, and they won't do it willingly. When you do things that are healthy and safe, the horse wants to recreate it.
Yep.
So so anyway, so one great way to connect with the horse, you know, to begin to help the horse, is to connect on a physical and emotional level, right? Just like you were saying. So you do that. I find the best way to do that is to meet a need. And I'll quickly tell you a story about this horse. So she came to a clinic. You see, she's a lovely horse, relaxed. Her eyes are closed. She did not show up that way. She was kicking like crazy if anyone tried to touch her. And I mean, you know, ears pinned. She was serious. She was going to hurt you. And what I thought, like, okay, this is going to be interesting. How can I connect with her? Like where, because, you know, I could look at her and think, okay, where can I put my hands so that it gives her an immediate feeling of relief? Immediate. Where can I relieve some of the effort that she's doing? And I was able to do that. And all of a sudden she melted and she became a sweetheart, and people could work with her, but I had to make that connection first. And I was very careful. I don't want to get kicked. So I'm not saying go do this with every horse that's kicking, but I had to find that open door where I knew I could give her an immediate sensation that was going to feel like relief to her. That's really, really important. And that was, I was meeting a need that she had. So that's how I made that connection. Okay, so here's another video, I think, because I don't know how much time you want to take looking at video, Wendy.
That's fine.
But we can certainly get started if I need to kind of rush through. It's like 4 minutes. But this is, I think, is a really good point. Is here was a mare, lovely, lovely horse, lovely rider, very educated, skilled, but she was stiff, especially on the left side, wasn't bending, wouldn't yield to the leg, all those things. She ended up, and you'll see what happens in this, and this is just a brief part of a session, but I set it up so that the horse would learn that bending felt good and she would do it on her own. So this clip doesn't have sound. There's no audio. So I can just kind of talk through what I'm doing. What I'm doing there is I have one hand, you can see, on the lower rib cage. My right arm is over the horse so that I'm moving her right side of her rib cage. She's licking and chewing. I'm finding her unique ways of moving her ribs, okay, of her whole rib cage, her sternum, everything, right? I'm finding that path of least resistance. And when I do that, it feels good to her because it means that the effort she was using with her muscles gets a chance to release, to let go. So suddenly now my hands are doing the work. And I'm going to say not just my hands. You'll see, and it'll become more obvious later, I'm actually using my rib cage to work with the horse. I do this a lot. So when I say it's a hands-on method, there's actually, it's different parts of your body. It's a body. It's back to your point about we use our whole body, right, to communicate.
Yeah, and because they're so, like a Feldenkrais lesson for a person, you can pretty much get from head to foot.
Yes.
But horse being so long, having a second pair of trained hands is super helpful in many cases.
Yes. Very
so,
important.
So the thing that you're bringing up, and this is such a classic Feldenkrais tenet, is instead of insisting right away to go somewhere else, you figure out what is this individual doing in their movement? Where are they going? What are they doing to take over the work so that the nervous system can calm down?
Absolutely. That is the key thing. Yes, that was beautifully said. And you'll start to see the relief in the mare's expression. So see my notes here, you know, as I added more support from my own ribs, right? So now she can start to associate pleasure and relaxed readiness with my contact. So what I was getting at for her was not only to be able to do the movement, but to be able to do it in relation to, say, the rider's leg, because then this could transfer then when the rider gets in the saddle. So it's like, how does she get a sense of ease and pleasure from the ask, if you will, from the suggestion?
And it's again, what you're doing is you're gradually coming in and following what she's able to do, not insisting that she do more than she can. And I think that this is so hard for people to understand, in that, you know, we're so busy trying to make it change. And this is my experience with physical therapy. I went for a very long time to a physical therapist to solve my vertigo that I had for years. And, you know, they were just, it was not helpful because they weren't actually showing my body how to do it. But 3 sessions with my trainer in 2 days, and it was 90% gone.
Wow.
Because, yeah, because
wow.
it was
Yeah.
asking and following instead of saying, this is how you're going to be better.
Yes.
And I think this is so important. And, you know, the other thing I want to say, Mary, while we're watching this video,
Yes.
is that, you know, Sharon Wilsey's horse speak so fits in with what you're doing, because you're constantly reading the horses, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is most of us that are good at this don't realize it. We're reading the horse's expression. And
Yes.
follow that.
Yes.
And that's where her work is such a good
That's wonderful. Yes, I've heard.
Well, yeah. And so there's a question that somebody's brought up. It's that she said, what was it? This person has trouble with her mare because she, you know, there isn't a place, like she can't touch her on the sternum and she can't touch her on the chest. She tries to bite and she won't let her ride her anymore. And so they were asking about your hand on the chest, but in my opinion, is that you've got to find somewhere else.
Yes.
Is something the horse
and actually, yeah. So can I get to that in 1 second? Because what I want to point out, this is going to end in a second. Yeah. Watch the horse bend around me. Do you see that? Think of how different this is exactly what you were saying, Wendy. When you ask, like, just say, oh, she's stiff to the left. Well, we'll kind of make her go that way, right? Or we'll give her a treat. We'll kind of coerce her to go that way, whether with force or whatever, right? Here, I set it up so she wants to bend.
Can you do me a favor and just go to the very beginning of the video and then to that point so that they can see the before and after?
Okay, so that's the beginning, and then...
And just look, yeah, absolutely. And you can see that in the beginning, the neck is really stiff and straight, the body's really held, and then this beautiful softness in the way the neck is draped
and then she comes off. Yes.
And it's not from the head.
It's not from the head, that's it. Thank you for saying that, Wendy. It's not from the head. And this is why, so getting back to the person with the horse whose sternum couldn't be touched. Okay, so it happens a lot. First of all, the sternum is a place that a lot of horses are protective in that area. So you have to be very, very careful. So even though my experience from more than 30 years of doing this is that horses end up loving the work with the sternum and the ribs and all that, some horses in the beginning don't like it. It's too threatening or they're too tight, whatever. They're also, and you may have experienced this with humans, Wendy, when the little, you know, the connection of the costal cartilage to the sternum, if it hasn't moved in a while, it can be quite sore. So when people
ribs
first
are so funny.
Yes. So you do have to be careful. But what I would say is just what Wendy said. There's other open doors on the horse. So you can affect the sternum by doing things on the side of the rib cage, for example, that will start to get that moving, right? I don't know where this person...
many ribs, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But then also the horse might be open to having something between your hand. I wouldn't go to the sternum at this point with that particular horse.
Right.
But I'll tell you a quick story. I was working with a horse, a Morgan, beautiful Morgan. He had a chronic suspensory ligament injury. There are a lot of those, and I've worked with a lot of them. And what I noticed was, like a lot of them, I really wanted to work with his ribs and sternum because I knew it would help resolve the problem.
Yeah.
It's incredible how it does, and I can explain why. But this horse was not letting me go near his sternum or his ribs. Not happening. Not happening. So what I always do is I think, okay, what can I put between my hand and the horse? Because a lot of times that'll work. Even a towel or a piece of fleece or whatever can work, or stroke them with a whip or whatever can help bring that awareness. But there was a lunge line lying on the ground, and I thought, all right, let me see what I can do with this. So I asked the owner, what do you think? And she's like, oh, he'll be fine with it. And I made sure he was fine, that he would be okay with it. And I wrapped it around his barrel. And it was magic. He was like, this is the best day of my life. He just went from, don't touch my ribs, you can't go near my sternum or anything, to this feels so good. And what was so super was I could use it in very particular ways. Now I wrapped it around him. I'll show you a picture later. I had access to his entire rib cage that way, if I move it. And I can influence the sternum, everything, his weight, his limb loading, all this cool stuff. And he had no objection to it whatsoever. And then I actually could sneak my fingers in and start giving him that and being, even more specific with my hands. But from that horse led me, and this was many years ago, to develop what I call my rib rope, where I started playing with different ropes and different things. And I do it with humans as well. So it works with animals, it works with humans, but it's a really powerful way of, for example, freeing the neck. Freeing people. A gal just told me the other day, she goes, Mary, I did my rib rope and my hip problem went away. So it's such an important piece. But that is one thing that you'll see information about it later. But if that gal wants to try doing something like that with her horse first, would be better than going and touching the sternum, unless she has help from somebody who's really skilled in this.
Well, and I just want to ask that when you had that lunge line, when you said wrapped around, it was still open to you, right? You had the two ends of it. So
yes. Oh, I wasn't tied. Thank you. It wasn't
that's
tied.
Different. Some people think, well, if they rope the horse, like,
no,
right?
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify that. But the other
thank you.
I
didn't.
I have to think about all the disciplines.
Thank you.
But the other thing is, you can be at a distance, so you can
yes.
still come to the horse's face and not
yes.
be bleeding, and at the same time offer something that may feel good.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, with the ropes, it's really cool because you saw the video I did with Leah. If I don't have Leah, because I don't get to have Leah unless I'm in Michigan, unfortunately, I will use ropes. In other words, so I can put some awareness on the pelvis. I'll have a rope open, not tied or anything, but wrapped around the pelvis, for example, around the ischial tuberosities. And I'm holding that with one hand and then working with the horse's sternum or chest or something with the other. And sometimes I'll have two ropes, one on the front, one on the back, or just one in my hand. Or I do all different combinations depending on the situation. But that's another way. To have someone skilled like Leah, of course, is great. Yeah. But if you're lacking that, there are other things. But you're right. The ropes allow you some distance as well. So,
and obviously the pressure is it's not about pressure. It's about contact.
Right. Yes. So it's bringing that awareness and just that little bit of an idea of a constraint. Okay.
So someone's asking, is it similar to the body wraps that the T-Touch people use?
Okay. So good question. I think the body wraps, are excellent. It's not the same thing. The body wraps, my understanding is they're more elastic. I know there's ropes too you can use, but that's more of an elastic feel. So it doesn't have, it's great and it does wonderful things, but it doesn't have the specificity of the rope. And I actually spent a lot of time experimenting to get the right kind of rope that would give the right amount, have the right amount of life in it to be able to very specifically give information to the horse, sensory information. So the wraps are great. They bring awareness. They help the horse use himself better, but to me anyway, and you may debate this, Wendy, they don't have the specificity of a rope.
Yeah, what I would say is they're similar but different. And so every piece of equipment and the way and the intention is going to change the way that piece of equipment works and what we're doing with it.
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly use the wrap this way, but again, you won't, I mean, try it on yourself. You know, you won't have the specificity with an ace bandage that you would with, here, I'm going to grab, this is a rib rope I use with humans, right? So it's a thin, you know, it's very specific, okay? I guess we just replayed that video. Yeah. This is another one. I don't know if you want to see the whole thing, but again, I'm using my hands now to very specifically move the horse's rib cage in the way that's easy for her. And now what's great is her range of what's easy has expanded unbelievably, okay? Where at first I had a tiny little bit of ease, now I'm getting much bigger range of what is easy for this horse, okay? So I don't know if you want to watch all of this.
Well, is it fair to say that like the rib rope and what you're doing there with your hands is a bit more specific, and you're maintaining that connection long enough for this horse to start actually becoming aware of where you are specifically showing her? In other words, what part of her body you're actually having a conversation with. And so, you know, it's so interesting to see you walk off with her, because it's so important that some of these things translate to movement. That's
exactly what I'll say right now, that it's so important to bring it into movement. It's one thing to do it when the horse is just standing around in the grooming area, right? But to actually bring it into something functional. Now look at our rib cage now.
Yeah.
Can you see that? Yeah.
And so, you know, one of the questions that I can imagine someone might ask is, how does what you're doing differ from the Masterson method?
I don't know the Masterson method.
Oh, okay.
I've heard of it, of course, and I've heard wonderful things about it.
Right.
I don't know it though. I haven't studied it. Have you studied it? Do you?
I haven't actually. I've had guests on that talk about Masterson.
Oh, okay.
So I think if I will, one of the differences for me with the Feldenkrais work is that we're taking the horses into movement.
Okay.
And I don't know enough about Masterson, but it seems to me that a lot of it is done standing as opposed to taking it into movement. And I need to have my Becky come back and talk to us more about the Masterson method, because I'm curious.
Yeah, I've always heard good things about it. So yeah.
And so I would say there are similarities and differences.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I don't feel like I'm educated enough to say what's different about it. Okay, so let's see. So this is just a quickie where I'm showing how, again, same mare, same session, that you see me working with the ribs, but then I have my other hand on her pelvis. So now we're bringing more of her into the movement, right? So we're creating that functional movement. We've broken it down. Now we're building it back up. And you see here, I actually bring her pelvis to the side as I very specifically move those ribs. And I say specifically for her, what she needs. And again, her range of what's easy and available has grown substantially. And then I bring, and so, okay, so this, and I'm just going to talk, people can watch, but I'll talk. I see so many people do things improperly. They mean well. They'll do something like a back lift where they press hard on the horse, you know, at the chest to get the back to come up, right? You've seen that, I'm sure, Wendy. And sometimes people do that in a very poor way. And I mean, it's a way that the horse doesn't feel safe. They may do it because it gets a reflex to happen, but it's not a functional, safe movement perhaps for that horse. Depends how you do it. So look at the difference now between how in the Feldenkrais work, we set up the whole environment so the horse now can soften her back. And you see I have one hand underneath, one hand on top. And now I'm going to take it into, look what she does with her leg, because this is all related to her issue with her left hind leg. All that work, you know, with her rib cage is affecting the leg. So you'll see how I start to bring it into softening the back and then walking off with her like that. So she feels it, and look at her yawning and all that. So if you take a horse that there's no preparation and you just ask them to do this, I've seen people use hoof picks and different things to get the horse to raise their back. That can actually have very detrimental effects on the horse. And their nervous system could be saying, we don't like that. That actually doesn't feel safe to us. It doesn't feel good. I don't want to do that again. Whereas something like this, we're always working within this ease and pleasure. So the brain wants to recreate it. And then eventually this is done with tack on, with the rider up, all of those things. So not only in movement, but with the added pieces of tack and rider, etc. But yeah, in a second here, I'm going to be walking off with her like this, and see how soft her back is.
And so much, you know, again, it's like, because someone looking at this might go, well, I've seen similar hand positions like this with other techniques. But again, it goes back to, you know, the intention and where the focus is. And I always think of it's like focusing a lens on a different aspect. In this case, it's then taking it into movement and giving her that feeling of her back up in movement, and, you know, integrating, like differentiating, just like a classic Feldenkrais.
Yes.
Differentiating and then integrating into function here being walking.
Yes. And eventually this would lead to, like I said, actually tacking her up and being ridden. And that's why I love working with the horses and Wendy knows this already, but other people may not. Moshe Feldenkrais, the man who originated the Feldenkrais method, he originally worked with people in their undergarments. And what he discovered was they would put their habits back on when they put their street clothes back on. And he's like, that's not good. So he started working with people fully clothed, which is what we do. And that's how I, you know, with the horses, I generally work with them untacked at first, but then add the pieces of tack. Because you can add a bridle, just say no saddle or anything. You can add a bridle and the movement through the horse's back will completely change.
Yep.
I've had that many times. The horse will just completely stop moving through the back. The rib cage will stiffen, even without picking up the rein. And I do all things where I integrate that into the session so that they can feel, oh, I can be free and I could move while I have tack on. Really cool.
Because, you know, I the way I refer to it is, what do you like when you visit your mother, and what do you like when you visit your friends?
Oh, okay.
Okay. See? And having, you know, if you're in the barn and somebody comes to give you a massage and it feels wonderful, and then you know, put your tack on and you go in the arena where whatever had occurred, and suddenly you're a different person. Or
the habits come up associated with that. So that's what we're, you know, as with Feldenkrais, we're always thinking about what habitual patterns are they bringing to the table. And so they will have horses will have habits about how they're, you know, how they feel when they have their tack on, when their riders on, when they're in the arena as opposed to the trail. Oh, right. I've had some wonderful students, Wendy, and I'm sure you have too. Students that are so good that they will get off when they're on trail, for example, and do the work I've shown them on their horse to bring the horse back to a place of softness, then get back on their horse. Or the horses that are kind of funny in the arena will get off, do it, get back on, and keep changing those associations so that they're helping their horse to the maximum.
Yeah, really, you can have people take their surefoot pads with them out on trail.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, wow. That is really good. Okay, they have to bring like a little bag or something for that. Backpack, of course. Oh, that's awesome. So, so just we'll quickly run through these. Why it's so important to improve the mobility of the rib cage is it can help heal or prevent a ligament or, you know, tendon injury to your horse's leg. Okay. You know, a horse may be doing asymmetrical limb loading. I write about this a lot because I've worked with so many where they're actually loading the damaged limb more. Yeah. And so they may get off of it when they're trotting, but their whole body is organized to be more over that leg. Okay. And this is a place where the rib rope has been very helpful for me as well, as is supporting what they do and then helping give them other options so they don't have to do that. Again, you know, the sternum and the ribs are so important. They're vital for the horse to be able to round the back and engage the hind end. there's no movement there, you're really fighting an uphill battle, and it's damaging for the horse. It's not going to be easy. Girthiness. I always say, if you told me I could only have one thing I could help horses with, like one thing, that's all you're allowed, Mary, I would say I would make saddling up pleasurable for the horse. So I do this with so many horses that they go from being wanting to bite and kick, or even those subtle ways that they're just tensing their muscles, and people call it blowing up. What a way, mentally and physically, you know, how do you start a ride like that? Like that, to me, people just tie the horse, or they're careful not to get kicked. And instead, you can use these hands-on movements. You can work with the rib cage so the horse is loving it, and you can do it as you're tacking them up. So I have a whole thing I go into with that because it's so valuable. And you know what I love? I have some great people, and so does Leah, and Leah had sent me pictures one day of these little kids tacking up their horses while doing, what do they call it, the girth rock or something, where the horses are just so happy, and the little tiny girls are doing this wonderful work with the horse's sternum and ribs, so the horses are happy while they're tightening the girth. So precious. Anyway, there is a way to do it that the horse actually not only just enjoys being saddled, but it actually prepares them for better functional movement. Okay,
so Mary, is there one thing that we could give our audience that they could do, like that they could do without any equipment, without anything special, that they could go and experiment to make their horses more comfortable to use?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have a clip. It's 3 minutes. So I'm going to just run through these quickly. I just wanted to have, just so some people don't know what the rib cage really looks like. So this is a nice drawing where you don't have the shoulder blade in the way. Here I'm holding an actual sternum.
Oh, you got to stay here for a second. This is awesome. I want people to realize where can you take your pointer and point out the girth groove?
Well, so you're saying back here?
Right there.
Yeah,
That's the girth groove. And I want people to see that it is a definite curve in the structure, and that's the only place their girth is going to go in the end, no matter where they try to put it.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. And this is just an amazing picture, Mary. I love this.
And that's my pony in the background, by the way. That's my boy Breeze. But
yeah. Anyway.
Sorry. But people, I want people to appreciate the shape of the sternum. Yeah. And I'm going to show you an interior view in a second, but how it's like a knife edge, and it actually lends itself very nicely to us working with it. Again, very gently, and you really need to be trained before you start playing around. So here is the interior of that specimen. And this horse was a little cockeyed. You always see pathology. I have a ton of different skeletal specimens, including an entire pony, which my dog, I came home one day to her chewing on him. But you can see the costal cartilage, you know, it attaches.
Can you point that out with your pointer?
Yes. So all of this is cartilage, and then it attaches to the bone. This is the rib bone, but see how it attaches here to the sternum. So you can see where the sternum flattens out here. So it's pretty cool, isn't it?
Right. And if you think about tightening your girth around that structure and over tightening your girth, that's going to put a lot of pressure on those areas.
You know, I read about a study. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the actual study, but I read this in more than one place where someone did a study. Unfortunately, I can't cite it, where I guess they did necropsies of youngish horses, and they found that an unbelievable percentage of them had evidence of hairline fractures of the costal cartilage. So of these areas, they actually had fractures. And when you think about all the horses, the way they're started, the way, you know, we tighten the girth, we don't pay attention to when they're in pain. You know, it's not like a lameness the same way like a leg lameness would be. And anyway, I thought that was a really sad statistic. So this is one of my big passions, is making saddling, doing it with awareness and doing it in a way that's healthy for the horse and pleasurable for the horse.
Right.
So here's just a front view of it. You can see again, it's like a boat, right? Like a boat.
Yeah, it's great. Great pictures.
Okay, so I'll just go through these quickly. It just shows how I'm like, I start, sometimes with just a saddle pad, doing the same thing. I added the saddle. I wouldn't recommend you do that without a girth, but I did. Now here is with the rider up. So again, we want to take this into something functional. So I want that horse, this is the same horse from the previous videos, to feel that, wow, I can still move these places when my rider is in the saddle. And then I could even walk around with the horse, you know, so there's all different ways of doing that. And that's where you were talking about body wraps before. Having a body wrap also can just be another little reminder for the horse. So all these things just work really well together. Okay, so here's what you were asking for, actually, Wendy. We're going to learn how to do what I call rib accordions. It's what looks like a basic movement, but this can be incredibly helpful in improving your horse with no equipment. And in 3 minutes, you can learn this. So here, I'm just going to walk you through that, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
You can use either your hands like this or like this, but you're very soft with your hands. The movement really comes from
This is important. The movement comes from your chest, not your hands.
Yeah, can you just, the audio's a little low. Maybe you can talk us through this.
Okay, yeah. So
I'm not like just doing
So, and I don't know how I can change the audio. Oh, I can shut off the audio.
You can shut off the audio and
Yeah,
talk
I'll
through
shut
it.
off the audio and just let it go. So I'm very, so even though I have my hands like that, I often actually do it with the palms of my hands. I'm thinking about bringing my arms together from my chest and then releasing from my chest so that my hands and arms are soft. Goes back to, we want to invite movement. We don't want to force movement. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm feeling. So I'm asking questions. I'm saying, can these ribs come together over here? I'm not forcing, I'm just saying, can they? And you see, I'm moving my hands to different parts of the rib cage so that, you know, the horse can feel all these different places, and also that I can feel where she goes. Because I'll give you a little backstory on this lovely horse. She was having some issues when she was turning, I believe, especially to the right, that her back would really tense up. So you would feel it. And again, this is where we go back to being curious. So I wanted to help her feel that as she's turning, because her head is unfortunately out of the video, but at some point she starts actually turning her head just like the other horse did, right, towards me. And then I really go with that. And I actually help her associate now, when you turn your head, if you can keep your back soft and bring your ribs together here, it's going to be an easier movement. Okay, so you're just gently bringing the ribs together, and then I start taking them apart a little bit. But the crucial thing, and on the next slide, I have the questions you ask, is you're always asking for, is this easy? Is this easy? How can I make this a little easier? So, and you move to different places on each side, and it's always a question. It's a very simple movement, but it can be really transformational to the horse, and you can really play with it. For example, I can then ask her handler to turn her head the other way, and I could do two things. I could do it almost like a little challenge in Feldenkrais, where we do the counterintuitive thing, where I bring the ribs together even though her head's going away, right? Give her a little challenge. It makes it then easier. Or I can do the symmetrical movement. But basically what you're doing, I call it accordions, rib accordions, because it's like an accordion, right? They come together and they go apart. But the
And so, Mary, is it fair to say that, you know, because it's so hard to judge from watching a video, but that you're not going to the maximum that this horse can do? You're actually
absolutely, yes,
just going again, what's easy. Because so many people think, well, if I go all the way as far as they can go, it's going to get better. But that doesn't necessarily work out, because now the nervous system experiences the limit as opposed to
exactly. That's exactly what, thank you so much for saying it. That's exactly what I was going to say. Now you're having the nervous system feel the limitation. Like, this is my maximum. Oops. You know, you don't want that. You always want to stay within the range of comfort. And the thing is, we have to remember in this work, what sets it apart, I think, from so many other modalities is you're really working with the idea of how the horse initiates movement. So for example, with the bending, with these ribs coming together, I don't need to know the limit, right? That's not helpful to me. That's not where you change movement. You change movement when you initiate it, right? You don't change it at the other end. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you want to stay small. So thank you for saying that, Wendy. That's really, really helpful.
Well, and we could even practice this on ourselves, couldn't we?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes.
Going, wait a second, I can do rib accordion.
Absolutely. Yes. So bring your own ribs, and you'll find, I will bet, 9.5 out of 10 of you will find that one side will be easier to bring the ribs together than the other. So if you really tune in, and you may find it's really different on different places on the rib cage, of course, and also due to our anatomy, right? There's different levels of, you know, different degrees of movement in different places, of course. But you'll find, you know, okay, maybe it's easy there, maybe it's even easier here, or whatever. But yes, do it with yourself. It's all of this stuff.
Oh, someone's asking, is your focus on the ribs or the intercostals, or both?
Okay, good question. So when I work, so I would say it's really both, but I'm connecting with the horse's skeleton. And even when I directly work with soft tissue, if I'm doing things where I'm actually working just with soft tissue, I'm always doing it in relation to the skeleton. So when I'm working with a horse, I'm always hallucinating the skeleton. It's always like thinking about how I'm connecting with the nervous system and hallucinating the skeleton. So the intercostals will change the tonus because of what you're doing with supporting the movement of the ribs, and the brain gets a signal to let things go, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. So, yeah, so you definitely want to just do light, easy movements, but all of the work I teach, I have people basically do awareness through movement, and then even hands-on on themselves, so they feel it before they, and then work with each other as partners before they do it with a horse, you know, because it's much lighter, just like Wendy said earlier, much lighter than you expect. You might think you have to use a lot of pressure. You won't feel, literally, you won't feel that much if you use a lot of pressure. You'll just feel force. You'll feel effort, and your horse will just feel force. Mm-hmm. So you want to be very, very light. Okay. Okay. So does that give us something we can play with there?
Yeah, no, I think that's great, because I always like to, if it's possible for the guests to have something that they can go out and experience a little bit of, because I think then it really brings it home.
Absolutely. And you'll have the replay up so they can come back
oh,
and watch that as well. Okay.
Yep. Surefoot Equine YouTube channel. In fact, somebody was just asking, and they all go up on the YouTube channel.
Awesome. So let me just go. Okay. So these are just some questions that they can look at, you know, when they do it. You know, how can you do the rib accordions to learn more about your horse, right? Can you slow down and really listen to your horse when you do it? Can the movements be easy and light? Can you keep your hands soft? Think about your breathing. Many of us hold our breath when we're learning something new. So notice how your horse is breathing. Can you imagine that your horse's breath is filling up the expanded parts of the rib cage? So if you're bringing the ribs together on one side, think of the other side really filling up with the air, with their breath, right? And start asking, is it easier on one side? Is it different places easier? Again, we want to come back to asking good quality questions. And ask yourself, what have I learned about my horse by doing this? And what have I learned about myself? Because it also tells us a lot about ourselves, even our habits of thinking, right? Am I doing it right? Oh, this is stupid, or whatever habits we bring to it. So, okay. So this is just a picture of that rib rope I was talking about. And if anyone wants to get more information, I have a little video where I talk you through the rib rope. There's nothing to buy. I don't sell these. You can use your horse's lead rope. You can use your dog's leash maybe, or belt, whatever. It's to do with yourself. You can go to marydebono.com/Wendy, and I'll get you set up with that. And
I'm like just putting it in the chat so people have it.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, so they can have that. And if they have, if the audio is bad on the rib accordion thing, I can send them an actual link if they email me, if they want that as well. That's fine too. If they want to hear it a little bit better, I'm happy to do that.
And where can they email you?
So it's, I'll show you the next slide. So mary@marydebono.com is my direct email. We make it easy, Wendy. You're Wendy at Wendy Murdoch, and I'm Mary at Mary Debono.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's so funny when I go to non-horsey places and they ask for my email address and I give it to them. They look at me funny. You have your own domain? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't everyone?
Everyone should, really. So, yeah, so this has been so fun, Wendy. I can't thank you enough. I'm just...
Oh, this has been great. And it's just, it's so nice to talk to a fellow Feldenkrais person, because I'm like, yeah, you know, I say this to my students, but it's so nice to have someone else, because you know, we use different words and different inflections.
Yes,
It's the same message. And I think that, you know, the Feldenkrais work has influenced my life so profoundly that I don't even realize all the places that I implement it. Because it's more than just a technique. It's also a way, if you will, a bit of a philosophy, because we ask.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's just a pleasure, because I knew that we were well aligned, just from all the things that, you know, from.
Yes. And it's so fun because you added so much to that. Like, I loved all the things you jumped, because you just,
Oh, I jump right in and interrupt everybody. Yeah.
But no, I love it, because it's like, yes, like it's so wonderful. I mean, yeah. So really the Feldenkrais method has totally transformed my life. So I want to share it with everybody. Yep. That's how I feel.
And then somebody in the chat just asked about, where is it? It was in the chat about your dog course, so they can find information.
So, yes. So I have here, I have a dog book called
If you unshare your screen, we can see it.
Oh, right. Okay. Unshare my screen. Okay, stop share.
We can, yep.
Okay, there you go.
Got it.
So I have a book called Grow Young with Your Dog.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, and you know what this is for you. Actually, some non-dog people even have bought this just for the Feldenkrais awareness through movement lessons in it. So you get, there's a lot of stories and about how Feldenkrais works, but there's also, you know, and there's 12 moves you learn with your dog, but there's also 10 awareness through movement lessons, and you get audios of them for free with the book. So I made it super, as a matter of fact, one of the big Feldenkrais trainers said, Mary, you didn't charge enough money for that book, because they get video clips for the dog stuff, and they get audio lessons for 10 awareness and movement lessons. And whether you buy the PDF off my website, or you go to Amazon and buy this or the Kindle, you get it. So there's that. And then I have, this is more in depth. This was actually an advanced training I did for Feldenkrais practitioners about working with dogs, but it applies to everybody. There's no, you know, it has awareness through movement for people, as well as how to work with dogs. Now, nobody uses DVDs anymore, but this is online. I sell it online. It's basically like a little course of videos that you can get online.
So learn about Feldenkrais and work with your dog with the Feldenkrais method, which I think is fabulous.
Yeah. So if they go to marydebono.com/store, they can find both of these there, or they can go to Amazon for the book if they want a hard copy or something. Yeah, I appreciate that, Wendy. Yeah. So thank you, whoever asked that question. Yeah.
All right, Mary, well, I'm about to run out of battery here.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone who's watching. I so appreciate, Wendy, thank you for all of this.
It's just great. I'm so glad to finally get to talk to you.
Me too, and I'm still hoping we're going to meet in person.
I'm sure we will.
I haven't given up on that.
Once this lets up and we can go back to the travels.
Absolutely.
So, Mary, thank you again. And just remember, everyone, you can find this and all the webinars on the Surefoot Equine YouTube channel. If you subscribe, then you'll get a notice every time we put up another webinar. Tomorrow we do not have a webinar, I believe that's right, but we do on Thursday, and it's Dr. Hillary Clayton, and we're going to talk about bits and bridles. And
that's so awesome.
I'm so excited about that webinar because it's such an important piece of this whole picture.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks, Mary. I'm sure we'll meet again soon. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.